Hello, everybody. I'm Ian Gibson here. Going to be doing the show today. Chris is taking a much-deserved honeymoon and hope he's enjoying his vacation. But regardless, we have college football to talk about. Week 0 is in the books. It is officially college football season now. There were 4 high-profile games that we'll be talking about today. Starting off with Farmageddon in Dublin, Ireland. We had Iowa State and Kansas State going at it. It was a very, very messy slot. It reflected the weather. There was a couple turnovers early in the game, and ball security was a huge problem throughout this game. But regardless, Iowa State and Kansas State really showed this was a typical Farmageddon game. Both of these teams have been in very close, very tight, very, very punchy, shall we say, defensive struggles. Regardless, it was a matter of who would make the big play more and make less mistakes. Both of these teams were not doing the best job of avoiding that. But when it came down to it, Iowa State was able to minimize their mistakes and take advantage of the ones that Kansas State made. Both had 2 turnovers in the game, and both had plenty of opportunities to score more points. But whether it be the weather, the time change, or something like that, both really couldn't get together and find the end zone. Avery Johnson for Kansas State had a very good game. I want to say that. He was 21 for 30, 2 touchdowns, and he threw over for 250 yards, much better than back to was actually. He threw 2 touchdowns as well, but was notably strip sacked earlier in the game. But really what really hurt Kansas State here was that they committed far too many penalties. So they were at only 6, and only 6 is a bit exaggerated. I know a lot of teams would kill for only 6 penalties, but they definitely came at the worst times. They definitely were, false starts, holding calls when they were deep in their own territory, making it first and very long. A lot different from 1st and 10 and 1st and 20. But the biggest call of the game was when Iowa State got the ball back. Kansas State had just driven down the field and scored to make it a 3-point game. Time is running off the clock. And it was 4th down and goal to go. And Matt Campbell decides, instead of taking the points and forcing Kansas State to have to score a touchdown with a little less than a minute, what he decided to on 4th and a yard was to go for it. And they got a outside run, and they were able to convert on 1st down. And even at the 1-yard line, they held him back, and they told him to take a knee. It was a very, very impressive win for Iowa State. And now they are on the inside track for the Big 12. For me and Chris, Kansas State was one of our Big 12 champion picks. So this is definitely going to hurt them because now they have a lot of ground to make up. These games have decided the past couple of years who is going to the Big 12 championship. And now that Kansas State has lost that, it's pretty much out of their control. They have work to do once both of these teams are coming back. And we've seen, Florida State, for example, last year, coming back from that game, losing to Georgia Tech, and then dropping a really bad one to Boston College. Not going to be so hard for these teams. Kansas State goes back and they play North Dakota at home. That'll be their home opener. And Iowa State will go back to their campus and they play South Dakota. So both D2 or FCS schools to minimize the wear and tear, shall we say, from the flight, the game, and all that. It was a very impressive game. There was a lot of people saying, maybe it was a bit boring, not the typical Big 12, but if you know this rivalry and you know Farmageddon, this is, what we expect from these two teams, and a fantastic way to start the season, in my opinion. Moving on, definitely the most, don't want to say talked about, but maybe looked scrupulously on was Dan Mullen's debut, UNLV versus FCS Idaho State. Dan Mullen, as anybody who has watched the show before, and you can see my shirt, we started the show during the Dan Mullen era. 2018 till 2021 was when Dan Mullen was head coach. He was fired in the middle of 2021 based on losses, Georgia just being so far ahead, and the fallout from a 2020 season where they were destined to go to at least a playoff spot to just a barely scraping into a bowl game thanks to a last game win against Florida State where he wasn't even the coach of. Another one was recruiting. He was very behind in the recruiting aspect compared to teams like Georgia, Tennessee, Bama. And ultimately, if anybody saw that show back then, my opinion was it was the right decision. It wasn't going to get better. And it just was going to get worse before we pulled the plug. But regardless, Mullen, now coming out of his hiatus, is now at UNLV. He got a lot of transfers in through the transfer portal, and UNLV was a favorite to pick, maybe a dark horse for not only winning the Mountain West, but potentially a playoff spot as well, especially if they could beat a team like Boise State, who is the class of the group of five. And it did not get off to a good start. Early on, Idaho State was running circles around UNLV. The only chance UNLV had to score early was a rushing play by Alex Orji, the quarterback, that he fumbled in the end zone. And you look at the end of the first quarter, it's 10-0 Idaho State. And the alarm bells were already sounding at that point. I saw people posting the score of online and on socials. It was not an encouraging game at all. Luckily, UNLV was able to come back. They do have the better talent, and they were able to force the 4 turnovers on Idaho State. They were able to score quick, which minimized any momentum change that Idaho State might have had. But regardless, 8 penalties for 90 yards is not acceptable. Even less is going 3 for 12 on third downs. That's where you have to be better in your third down management. You have to make it third and short. If it's a 2nd and 8 or 9, you have got to run, either in-route slant plays. You don't need a first down right off the bat, but you have to make it manageable to get that third down. It is a lot harder to stop a 3rd and 2 than a 3rd and 6, 7. If you want a perfect example of that, look at what Iowa State did in the game in Dublin, especially that 4th down call. It was 4th and a yard or 2. That's where you just have to bully the other team. But regardless, for UNLV, it was a very disturbing start on the defensive side, giving up over 500 yards against a FCS school like Idaho State. Idaho State is a very impressive program at the FCS level, but for UNLV, you were 20-point favorites. You were expecting to blow the doors off this team, and you didn't, and you had to rely on some late game heroics. I joked when they were down in the 3rd quarter. I remember texting my cousin George, and I think I texted Chris as well, that Mullen is getting the Samford game, which really was the firing squad bit for Florida. For those who don't know, Florida had to win a shootout in 2022, or 2021, sorry. It was a 70-52 win. Stanford had 52 points and over 500 yards, and I joked, I said, he's just getting it out of the way early. Regardless, a lot of things need to be looked at defensively. Too many blown coverages, too many missed assignments. It was a very lackluster start defensively and for the team. But hopefully for UNLV, they will, get it together. Their offense looks great. The 2 quarterback tandem that they have is very impressive with Calandra and Orji. It's going to be interesting how Mullen decides this. Orji obviously running quarterback, but he does have very good throw power in Calandra. Very more pocket presence. He did very good. He did throw for a touchdown, and it was about like a 70 completion percentage, which is what you're looking for in a quarterback. But we're going to have to see how the quarterback competition pans out, and even if they're going to be doing kind of the dual-wield thing of having Orji or Calandra on certain packages, similar to how when Milroe and Bryce Young were still in together, there would be certain plays Alabama would play, certain packages to have the two of them play. Regardless, this was one of the most talked about games based on how close UNLV won by, and a lot has been left to be desired. Dan Mullen's going to have to find a way to prove the naysayers wrong. They go to Sam Houston next week, which Sam Houston also played in week 0, and they were able to, I wouldn't say, they didn't lie down and die, but they certainly got, beat up pretty good by Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky is certainly a dark horse in Conference USA, so there's really no shame there. But they were able to put 24 points on them and over 200 yards passing, and I think it was almost 400 yards. So now you got to deal with a Division I team, regardless of what you think about Sam Houston, after you just gave up 500 yards to an FCS school. So that's going to be a very interesting game to see next week, UNLV and Sam Houston. All right, moving on now. We have Kansas and Fresno State. Kansas, this was a real coming out party for Jaden Daniels. A very impressive win. Kansas wins 31-7. And there's not a whole lot to talk about in this one, mostly because Kansas really dominated on all sides of the ball. Fresno State got off to an early start. They were able to play keep away for a bit, but and tie it off a really good drive. But Kansas was just all over them. The defense especially was fantastic, forcing 3 turnovers on Fresno State. And for Fresno State, obviously they're trying to get back to that, power they were when they were in the Western Athletic Conference and the Mountain West. But it's been a very, very trying rebuilding year. But for Kansas, sky's the limit right now. Jaden Daniels, fantastic game. He threw for over 176 yards. And it was, like I said, real homecoming for the program, because this was their first game in the rebuilt stadium, and it was a sellout. The stadium looked great. Crowd was packed. It was like 2007 all over again for the Jayhawks. If the offense can keep running, if Jaden Daniels can stay healthy and stay in that, stay away from the sacks and just move out of the pocket, Kansas can be the spoiler once again to a lot of teams in the Big 12. So very interesting to see Kansas, come out firing and look as good as they did. We knew they were going to be good, but it's really impressive to see that they just handled business, took care of Fresno State, and went on from there and are already moving on to next week. And technically, they lead the Big 12 right now. Now that Iowa State and Kansas State lost, I think it would be a division tie. I think Iowa State actually would be in first place, but 1-1 now. Final game, and this was the Cinderella story of the day. And how could it not be? It was Hawaii and Stanford going at each other in Honolulu. It was a real barn burner of a game, kind of similar to Farmageddon in Ireland. Not the most maybe impressive, but it was very, very close. Both squads were going toe-to-toe with each other. Stanford's defense actually did a pretty good job getting to the quarterback, Alejandro, and getting into that backfield. But Alejandro had a very good game. He did, I think it was over 200 yards, and Ashlock was the primary receiver. He had over 9 receptions, and he did haul in a touchdown. Hawaii's defense did a very good job minimizing Stanford's attack, and Stanford was actually able to score their first rushing touchdown in over 2 years. I believe people have seen that stat before. But for Hawaii, defensively, like I said, was the most impressive thing, because they were on the field for a long time. Stanford was killing them in the time of possession, but they were able to kind of bend, don't break. They had the lead 17-13, and then they lost the lead in the fourth quarter. It was an insane, I think it was like a 20-play drive. But regardless, there were other drives where, Stanford was only held to a field goal. It was like 11 plays, 15 plays. It was ridiculous. The other touchdown was the fumble recovery for the Stanford Cardinal. But Hawaii kept in there. They would not go away. And they were able to claw their way in. And it really was the true hero was Kensei, and sorry if I mispronounce this, Kensei Matsuzawa. For those who don't know the story, he was originally from Japan and on a vacation went to an NFL game and fell in love with it so much, the sport of football, that he went on YouTube and learned how to be a kicker. And sure enough, not only does he get all of his field goals to go and extra points, and not only does he get the game-tying field goal, he kicks the game-winning field goal in his first ever football game. And it doesn't get any better than that. A fantastic game, and it was really this whole week. It was a Iowa State and Kansas State gave us the perfect start of the week and the season of week 0, and then Hawaii and Stanford gave us the perfect bookend to that. Hawaii, obviously, it was just announced to for that program. They are rebuilding the Aloha Bowl and will be getting their on-site stadium, the big one, back. That was the one that we would see late at night in the mid-2000s. Guys like Cole Brennan finding ways to go undefeated and winning the Western Athletic Conference. So that's good to see for the Hawaii program, because there was certainly danger that they would not be able to even have the program still if the things fell through. Regardless, Hawaii moves on. They will now play Arizona next week. And schedule-wise, Hawaii, it's pretty favorable. They as well play Sam Houston State later in the week. The real telling one, I think, will be that Fresno State game. If Fresno State, who was able to, at least early on, get the jump on Kansas, and that's the first Mountain West game Hawaii plays, I want to see how Hawaii does with this. They have the momentum. They have a very good win. They go to Arizona. That one is going to be a lot tougher to win because it's on the road, and Arizona is frankly just better right now. But once they go back home to Sam Houston, and then I think they play Portland State, an FCS school, then they got to do Fresno State on the third and final game of that home series. And how they do against that could be telling on see if they're going to a bowl game or if they're going to be kind of stuck in the rut with maybe on the outside looking into a bowl appearance. For Stanford, obviously for those who were watching the game, the big news was all the general managers now in college football. Andrew Luck is the general manager, and for Stanford, it's not going to get any easier. They go on the road to BYU, and then they have to play Boston College. That one will be at home. That's the first ACC game, which is ridiculous, crazy to say 5 years ago that Stanford and Boston College, who are literally on other ends of the country, are in the same conference, and this is their first conference game. It's a very tough schedule, and it's going to be interesting to see how they respond. Now, there were parts that they did look good. The rushing attack, like we said, they only had like 200 total, a little over 200 yards total. But the rushing game was actually pretty impressive. They had over almost 200 yards rushing. Branson, the quarterback, was 50% in his pass completions. He did have that interception and was barely able to get over 100 yards. But if that rushing attack for Stanford can continue, it makes life so much easier for that passing attack, for play actions and deep routes and such for the Cardinal. So we're going to be interesting to see how these two West Pacific Coast teams do moving on. Regardless, that was the highlights of week 0. Obviously, this is a much shorter show. We only had 4 games. This was kind of the appetizer to the season, and now we are getting on to the main course, that being week 1, obviously highlighted by Texas, Ohio State at 12, Alabama and Florida State at 3:30, and then ending with Clemson and LSU at around the 7, 8 o'clock time. And of course, a million other games going on. It's like it really is Christmas for everybody this next weekend. Regardless, thank you so much for watching. Hope you all enjoyed. And yeah, we will talk to you all soon. Thank you.